Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we're doing breaches of the week. And as always, I'd like to thank the following people that linked me, tagged me, sent me messages, whatever it was to get me that. It is always, always appreciated. And that is Jason Dance, Jacqueline Wolf, David Walker, Chris Fallon, Richard Reefer, and Barrett Peterson. Guys, thank you so much. And if you have a tip for me, please send it my way, and I will give you a shout out here and on my radio show as well. And with that, let's dive right in, because this week makes up for last week, which wasn't that long, so strap yourselves in. We are starting in Scotland with the Glasgow Caledonian University. The university is managing the quote-unquote limited breach with the help of the Scottish government and their cybersecurity experts. It says there's no evidence data has been compromised or that ransomware was used, and that's all I know at this point. So heads up, I guess, whatever you're going to do with that, Glasgow Caledonian University had some kind of cyber attack. Moving on, let's talk about Health Plan of San Joaquin, which is a nonprofit Medi-Cal managed care provider in the state of California. A potential email breach was suspected around October 12th of last year when anomalous activity was identified on their email system. They determined on October 23rd that multiple employee email accounts had been remotely accessed by an unauthorized individual. Obviously, that's a huge problem, and it looks like it's between September 26th and October 12th of last year when this took place. A compromised account basically contained protected health information on 420,433 individuals. So heads up if you use Health Plan of San Joaquin. Moving on, let's talk about Daily Quiz. This is a website, and I believe it's an app as well, because the personal details of 13 million Daily Quiz users have been leaked online this year after an attacker breached basically their database and stole the content and then put it up for sale. The database basically has two different sources, and it basically contains 12.8 million users, including plain text passwords, emails, and IP addresses for 8.3 million of those accounts. So if you use Daily Quiz in some way, shape, or form, heads up, your data is being sold. Please change your passwords, and hopefully you didn't use that password anywhere else. Change those too. Moving on, I want to give you guys an update on Air India. Last week, they declared a data breach thanks to the SITA breach from months ago for their frequent flyers. Apparently, it's way worse because now it's understood that 4.5 million Air India frequent flyer members were affected by this, which obviously is worse. So heads up to you if you fly Air India. Once again, not cool. Air India for lowering that number last week. Moving on, let's talk about audio maker Bose. You might have their speakers or their earbuds, all that kind of stuff. They disclosed a data breach following a ransomware attack that hit them in March. Now, they first detected this event on March 7th in 2021. This is for their U.S. systems here in the United States. Quote, based on our investigation and forensic analysis, Bose determined on April 29th of this year that the perpetrator of the cyber attack potentially accessed a small number of internal spreadsheets with administrative information maintained by our Human Resources Department. This basically pertains to employees of Bose, and so the personal information of those employees exposed includes names, social security numbers, compensation information, and other HR info. So heads up if you work for Bose. Moving on, let's talk about Domino's Pizza in India. Domino's India, basically they suffered a data breach in April that contained 180 million customers' records. I actually look, and I did talk about that a while ago. Now that data is actually public thanks to a searchable portal, and so you can go and look your stuff up. You can literally search for your phone number or email address to check on orders that you've placed with there. And the dreaded part is that this data contains information about your order location, obviously phone number, email ID, and all of that. So it makes it very easy for scammers or spammers to locate your home or office address if you've been ordering online through Domino's India. So heads up to you, Domino's India customers. Moving on, let's talk about the Indonesian government, because the personal data of 279 million citizens may actually be out there in the dark web. Now, the threat actor, which is basically known as COTS, leaked a sample of 1 million citizens' data to prove that they actually did hack this. Now, the leaked data includes citizen names, national ID numbers, tax registration information, mobile phone numbers, and for some citizens, also came with headshots and salary-related information. The Indonesian government has blocked access inside of its borders to Raid Forums, which is a well-known cybercrime hub, in an attempt to limit the spread of that sensitive data. And so Heads up to you, if you are a citizen of Indonesia, your data may be out there. Moving on, let's talk about Park Mobile. This is actually an update from their March data breach. If you recall, their very popular app, but apparently local municipalities are platforming on that app to go ahead and give their local people the ability to use a customized app. And so Park Houston, as in Houston, Texas, has been using them on their platform, so they just declared a data breach now. Heads up to you, if you're in Houston and using the Park Houston app, your data might be out there. Moving on. Let's head on over to Japan for the Omiai dating app. It's one of the largest dating apps apparently in Japan. The matchmaking app was recently hit, basically likely exposing personal information of more than 1.7 million account holders. And obviously this is a very high profile attack in Japan. Among the data exposed were photos of IDs used to confirm the age of users, including driver's license, insurance cards, and passports. Credit card data was not leaked in the attack, according to them this past Friday, adding that it has yet to confirm misappropriation of personal information. And as of April, they had 6.8 million accounts. So heads up to you if you're using the Omiai app in Japan. Sticking with Japan, let's talk about the Japanese government itself and Japanese corporation Fujitsu. This obviously is a huge one. Threat actors have breached the offices of multiple Japanese agencies after they gain access to projects that use Fujitsu's Project Web information sharing tool. Now, Project Web is basically a SaaS product, software as a service platform for enterprise collaboration and file sharing that was provided by Fujitsu. Fujitsu confirmed the breach and basically revealed that the attackers also stole some customer data belonging to multiple government entities in Japan. Now, at the time of this, basically, I'm talking to you here, it's not clear how the attackers compromised the service or who was behind it, but when we are looking at the Japanese federal government, we are talking about the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism, the Cabinet Secretariat, the Narita Airport, and others are some of these agencies that were impacted by this. Data exfiltrated by the attackers includes government employee records and contractor data stored in the platform. The Cabinet Cybersecurity Center, or NISC, launched an investigation into this incident, and Fujitsu experts first detected this intrusion on May 24th. So obviously this is new and unfolding. We will see what happens, but the Japanese government looks like it's got a very serious incident on its hands. We shall see where this goes. I'll keep you up to date. Moving on, let's talk about a banking Trojan named Bizarro. This is originating out of Brazil, and essentially it's targeting 70 banks worldwide, specifically in Germany, Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Chile, Argentina, and Brazil as well. Essentially, when it's installed onto Windows, it basically forces a user to enter their banking credentials and then uses social engineering to steal the two-factor authentication codes that the user may have so that they can get into banks. So heads up, if you are banking in one of those, you might want to check in with your bank as well, because obviously this is spreading. And as soon as they start basically declaring, meaning the banks start declaring data breaches, you know I'll keep you up to date here, but that's crazy. Moving on, let's talk about Canada Post. This is the postal service in Canada. They've informed 44 of their large commercial customers that a ransomware attack on a third-party service provider exposed shipping information to their customers. Canada Post obviously is the primary postal operator in Canada and serves 16.5 million Canadian residential and business suppliers. Now, or business addresses, excuse me. They disclosed a third-party supplier named Comport Communications suffered a ransomware attack. So that's obviously a huge thing. And what we're talking about is sender and receiver contact information, names, and mailing addresses. In total, there were 44 commercial customers that were affected in Canada, serving 950,000 receiving customers. So obviously that's a big one. Heads up to you if you are receiving anything through Canada Post. Moving on. Let's talk about Health and Human Services. Basically, this is the Department of, in the United States. This is the agency that oversees HIPAA, which is the healthcare cybersecurity or healthcare protection that we have. And so by virtue of that, there are companies that are being investigated for HIPAA breaches this week. Those would be Swedish Covenant Health or Swedish Hospital here in Illinois, 4,206 patients possibly affected. Beach Acres Parenting Center in Ohio, 500 patients there. Westwood Obstetrics and Gynecology in Illinois, 23,931. Harper County Community Hospital in Oklahoma, 5,725. And Tidal Health Peninsula Regional in the state of Maryland for 4,070 patients. All were either quote unquote hacking or IT incidents. And so heads up to you if you use any one of those. Those basically are your HIPAA breaches of the week as disclosed by HHS. Moving on, let's talk about another undisclosed entity, which is the U.S. municipal government, or rather, I guess the last one was disclosed. This one is not. Basically, this undisclosed U.S. municipal government we're talking about here because the U.S., basically the Federal Bureau of Investigation, said that basically attackers breached the network of this local government after exploiting vulnerabilities in their unpatched Fortinet networking appliance. Now, this intrusion was detected in May of 2021, and the FBI said an industry alert sent out an industry alert published on this specific issue. This attack comes after the FBI had previously warned the private sector and government agencies to make sure they're updating their Fortinet appliances and devices. And this time that alert went out in April of 2021. At this time, they said a foreign nation state hacking group, they're also considered an advanced persistent threat, were scanning the internet for Fortinet devices and exploiting 3 bugs or vulnerabilities that these devices had that Fortinet has indeed updated, and Fortinet attacks have been going on for months. So make sure that if you're running a FortiGate firewall or any other Fortinet product, it is fully 100% patched up to date. This was a massive exploit, so that's obviously a huge, huge thing. Moving on, let's head up to Alaska and basically talk about their health department because the website of Alaska Health Department was forced online this week by a malware attack. Local authorities launched an investigation into the attack. At the time, basically, of me sitting here speaking to you, they did not provide details about this intrusion, not that I could find. Now, it is not clear how the attackers actually got into the network health department or Alaska's health department network and how they planted the malicious code. The COVID-19 vaccine appointment scheduling and data dashboards were not impacted by this because they're hosted by outside sources. So heads up to you if you are in Alaska and have anything to do with the health department there. Moving on, let's talk about Peloton and its closest rival, Echelon, because security researchers are saying that both exercise giants are not basically removing or obfuscating user-uploaded profile photos or stripping it of their metadata, and in some cases, by virtue of that, they're exposing the real-world location data of their users. Almost every file, photo, or document contains metadata, which is basically data about the file itself, how big it is, when it was created, by whom. Oftentimes you can tag GPS into that. Photo and video will often include location tagging as well, and here we are. But basically, this is obviously a serious problem because Peloton has been in the news recently for leaking public user data just in general. Even if you set your user profile to private, they band-aided that so that only internal users could actually go and see that user. You'd have to create an account with Peloton to actually be able to get through that as opposed to just looking for it publicly. But that's a huge problem. And if these photos are being leaked online, then it's very possible if you've got a photo of you in your house next to your Peloton, I now can get the GPS coordinates of your house. That's obviously a very serious issue. Hopefully Peloton and their rival Echelon will fix that ASAP. Moving on. Let's talk about the government of Belgium because Belgium's Federal Public Service Interior, or FPS, this is basically the Interior Ministry of Belgium, has suffered a complex, sophisticated, and targeted cyber attack. Now, when Microsoft released an out-of-band security update for Microsoft Exchange servers in early March to fix serious vulnerabilities exploited by the Hafnium threat actor, basically the FPS Interior called on their Center for Cybersecurity Belgium, or CCB, to help with patching their servers. And while doing that, CCB also carried out more extensive monitoring and I quote, found subtle leads to questionable acts on the network of the SPF Interior. Now, the investigation showed that the attackers actually broke in April of 2019, so more than 2 years ago. meaning that they did not exploit the exchange flaws, these current ones rather, to get in. They've been there for a while. And I quote, "The complexity of this attack indicates an actor who has cyber capacities and extensive resources. The perpetrators acted in a targeted manner, which sounds like espionage." Now, the FPS interior hosts databases related to the country's police services, immigration affairs, the organization of elections, and also the distribution of identity cards. And so obviously that's a huge, huge thing. 2 years attackers were in there. Obviously, as we know more, I will let you know. And finally, and we have a couple of different finalies for you today. These are actually really interesting. Of course, that's why they're the finalies. First one we're going to be talking about is the U.S. military that is guarding the nuclear stockpile in Europe. Now, U.S. troops charged with guarding the nuclear weapons in Europe used popular education websites to create flashcards which exposed their exact locations and top secret security protocols, according to basically an investigative site known as Bellingcat this past Friday, a couple of days ago. Now, to familiarize themselves with things like which shelters in various locations had quote-unquote hot vaults with live nuclear weapons, the security patrol schedules, and with identification badge details, the soldiers created digital flashcards on apps like Chegg Prep, Quizlet, and Cram. And I quote the researcher, or rather Bellingcat, by simply searching online for terms publicly known to be associated with nuclear weapons, Bellingcat was able to discover cards used by military personnel serving at all 6 European military bases reported to store nuclear devices. They found one set of 70 flashcards on Chegg entitled "Just Study" with an exclamation point, which noted the exact shelters containing nuclear weapons at the Volkel Air Base in the Netherlands. Now, and I quote, "How many WS3 vaults are at the Volkel AB Air Base?" said the question slide on one of the virtual flashcards, referring to the military term for weapons stored at these security systems, and the other side of the virtual flashcard said 11. So now, if you want to know how many WS3 vaults there are at Volkel Air Base, you could have simply looked it up on Chegg, and boom, there's 11 of them. Another card from the same set indicated that 5 of the 11 vaults were hot with nuclear weapons, while 6 were cold, and specified which vaults had what. That's crazy. Now, a set of 80 cards on the Cram flashcard site detailed both hot and cold vaults at the Aviano Air Base in Italy and revealed how a soldier should respond in activating them based on different levels of alarm that they receive. Other cards exposed secret bases in Turkey, or secrets at bases, in Turkey, Belgium, and Germany. Some detailed the location of security cameras. Other gave basically the secret duress words that a soldier, perhaps seized by attackers, would say over the phone to indicate that they had been taken prisoner or hostage. The flashcards Bellingcat discovered were publicly available as far back as 2013, and some were being used as recently as April of this year. That is crazy. Bellingcat said that it appeared to have been removed after they contacted NATO and U.S. military for comment, and so they took those down. But man, for 7+ years, we basically had flashcards out there that would give you the locations of vaults, which vaults had hot nuclear weapons or not, basically safe words that you're supposed to say, and these are on public sites. I've seen Chegg before. If you Google the 5 laws of cybersecurity, which was my second TED Talk, you'll basically see that there's been somebody made that like flashcards for the 5 laws of cybersecurity. Obviously, I'm assuming studying for something, a cybersecurity course, I would imagine, in college. But that's out there. That's public. You can go see that. But you can also see nuclear weapon information all over Europe as these soldiers figured, well, it'll be easier just to do this. And I think that really underscores a lack of understanding of, critical control, that we have to maintain and guard the ecosystems where we're storing our data. Otherwise, they might be publicly exposed or data mined, or what if one of those third parties, even if it was set private, had a data breach because they weren't vetted, or they didn't have good security, and they're obviously not vetted for military use. This is a huge, huge problem that we have, and I think that it really just belies us to stop and think exactly what sensitive information we're putting where in the cloud and who is owning this, possibly data mining this, leaking this, or can gain access to this. That's a huge, huge thing. And that's why it's one of the finales for this week. And another finale is the Tor network itself. Now, you may know it for being secure and making you anonymous as you browse, and here we go. Now, as a primer, if you don't know, Tor is an open source software for enabling anonymous communication on the internet. It obfuscates the source and destination of a web request by directing network traffic through a series of relays in order to mask the user's IP address and location and usage from surveillance or traffic analysis. Basically, while middle relays typically take care of receiving traffic on the network and passing it along, the exit relay is the final node that the Tor traffic passes through before it gets to the website. So if I want to go to google.com on Tor and I'm sitting here in Chicago, Tor might route me to Canada, to Sri Lanka, over to Belgium, and then back to, I don't know, New York City, and then from there I go to Google. And so that's essentially how that works. And it's those exit relays that we're talking about here, because an unknown threat actor managed to control more than 27% of the entire Tor network's exit capacity in early February of this year, according to a new study on dark web infrastructure. And I quote, "The entity attacking Tor users is actively exploiting Tor users since over a year and expanded the scale of their attacks to a new record level," an independent security researcher who goes by the name Nusnu said in a write-up published last week Sunday. Quote, "The average exit fraction this entity controlled was above 14% throughout the past 12 months. That is crazy. Now, it's the latest in series of an effort undertaken to bring to light malicious Tor activity perpetrated by the actor since December of 2019. The attacks, which are said to have began in January of 2020, were first documented and exposed by this same researcher in August of last year. Exit nodes on the Tor network have been subverted in the past. I've actually done videos on that to inject malware such as Onion Duke, but this is the first time a single unidentified actor has managed to control such a large fraction of Tor exit nodes. The hacking entity maintained 380 malicious Tor exit relays at its peak in August of 2020 before the Tor directory authorities intervened to basically cull those nodes from the network, following which the activity once again crested earlier this year with the attacker attempting to add over 1,000 exit relays in the first week of May. All the malicious Tor exit relays detected during the second wave of the attacks have since been removed. So basically, what we're talking about here is you can basically be using Tor, you believe you're anonymous, but you're actually being tracked. About 27% at its peak, a quarter of all Tor exit nodes were actually owned by a threat actor, and we don't know who that threat actor is. That's obviously very serious. And so if you're using Tor, heads up, it's not as secure as you think it is. And a lot of us security researchers don't use Tor when we're going very deep into the dark web because of the ramifications that we've seen in the past, including Tor basically being broken, I believe it was by Carnegie Mellon a few years ago on behalf of the FBI. Tor obviously updated since then, and that cat and mouse game continues. But heads up, Tor users. And finally, we have to talk about Russian-based attackers and Microsoft. This is the big cyber threat news for the week. Tom Burt, Microsoft's corporate vice president of customer security and trust, disclosed in a blog this past Thursday that the Russian group Nobilim targeted about 3,000 email accounts from 100 different organizations in 24 countries. The United States received the largest share of those attacks. Burt said that at least a quarter of the organizations targeted were involved in international development, humanitarian, or human rights work. Now, the attacks were launched by gaining access to the email marketing account of the United States Agency for International Development, also known as USAID, which falls under the State Department. From there, the attackers distributed phishing emails that looked real but included a link basically with a malicious file. Burt wrote that the attackers, and I quote, appear to be a continuation of multiple efforts by Nobilim to target government agencies involved in foreign policy as part of foreign intelligence gathering efforts. In a separate post, Microsoft said the attackers sent emails to recipients basically who made it appear like an alert. Basically, they sent out looking like an alert that stated, and I quote, "Donald Trump has published new documents on election fraud." Obviously, you'd be very interested in that if it's coming from a legitimate government source. And so basically you might click the link. And if you click the link, the URL would direct you to a legitimate constant contact service, and to then basically Noblem's controlled infrastructure, and a malicious file would then be delivered to you. Now, a spokesperson for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, told The Hill in a statement, quote, "We are aware of the potential compromise at USAID through an email marketing platform and are working with the FBI and USAID to better understand the extent of the compromise and assist potential victims. Noblem, which is based in Russia, is the same threat actor, if you didn't know, that hit SolarWinds in 2020. And basically, they obviously gained access to at least 18,000 enterprise customers, government agencies, 9 federal agencies, et cetera, et cetera. The Biden administration has also formally acknowledged that Russia is basically being behind this attack and sanctioned Russia in mid-April over its involvement. The attack also came a couple of weeks after cyber criminals launched basically the Colonial Pipeline attack. You've heard me talk about that here, forcing it to shut down. So obviously, we have a huge, huge problem with intelligence operations, cyber warfare around the world. Everybody's hacking everybody. And even though we have some conventions signed, not every country, has signed these conventions. So it's obviously a very huge problem, a very serious issue. And hopefully, we can all just chill out and basically stop breaking aid organizations. I think that would probably be a pretty good thing to do. Hopefully just stop breaking. I'd love to have a week where it's like, I got nothing to report, let's talk about something else. But those were your breaches of the week. Were you affected? Let me know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.